If you are new to this channel and enjoy the content that you see, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications to be alerted and notified whenever a brand new video is posted onto this channel, along with following me on these social media platforms to stay connected with me at all times. Also, feel free to check out all of your favorite videos and playlists located down in the description box below. Thank you so much for your continued support. Now let's begin. With Tony Stark confirmed to travel through different dimensions and pockets of time and revisiting past events of the Avengers history, the question lingers: if Tony Stark does end up collecting all of the Infinity Stones, can Tony Stark ultimately create another Infinity Gauntlet to combat against Thanos? Now, a lot of people have been suggesting that one of two outcomes are going to occur in the Avengers 4 movie. Outcome number one, Tony Stark gathers all the stones and creates some sort of an Infinity Gauntlet, either using the precious metal of vibranium located in Wakanda in creating some sort of a vibranium gauntlet that can combat that of Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet, or scenario B, Iron Man can ultimately do what he does best and build himself another suit. But the only difference here is, unlike his previous suits, just as we saw Tony Stark create the Hulkbuster suit, he ultimately ends up creating a suit that harnesses the powers of the Infinity Stones and using that to his advantage in creating some sort of a Thanos Buster suit and going up against Thanos, who also happens to wield that of all 6 of the Infinity Stones. Now, when looking at the reality of what Tony Stark has to do to acquire all 6 of the Infinity Stones, the one stone that comes to mind that's going to be the most difficult is going to be the Soul Stone, because for that, Tony Stark is going to be required to sacrifice the one thing that he loves in order to further acquire such power, which ultimately begs the question: is Tony Stark possibly going to sacrifice his own friend, Captain America, in order to gain such a stone to use that for the greater good of the universe to defeat Thanos? A lot of people within the Marvel Cinematic Universe community have been discussing and theorizing on the possible outcome of Tony Stark sacrificing Steve Rogers by consent of Steve Rogers in order to acquire that stone to further destroy Thanos, which again also begs the question: would Captain America be willing to sacrifice his own life for the greater good of the universe? And to that, I would say yes. And I do believe that with Tony Stark traveling through different pockets of time, different realities, and seeing how the Avengers first faced off against Loki, Ultron, even each other in Civil War, I do believe that with Tony Stark having to use Ant-Man in traveling to these places, he is ultimately going to change the events of what happened during the course of that time to further better the current outcome in which the Avengers are facing off against Thanos in, to further prevent Thanos from destroying the current universe. Which, to Tony's credit, he's not a dumb man. Tony Stark has been able to achieve and create inventions that superseded everybody's expectations in what he was able to create, even going as far as creating barf technology and even implementing nanotech within his suits as seen in Infinity War. So for Tony Stark to embed the powers of the Infinity Stones in some sort of an alternative gauntlet, or maybe even a suit himself, isn't too far-fetched. And I do believe that even with the brain power of Rocket Raccoon, Bruce Banner, even Shuri, by combining their ideas and thought process and putting their brains together, they could ultimately achieve anything. Which is why I do believe one of the following outcomes is bound to happen, considering the fact that this has also been Tony's war 6 years in the making. Having to follow the events of the first Avengers film, this is what Tony Stark has been preparing for ever since the invasion of New York City by the hands of Loki, in preparation to everything he's gone through in Age of Ultron, creating suits that can defend the Earth from such invaders, to now having to see what Thanos is capable of. I do think that Tony Stark has no other alternatives but to gather all of the stones together in using that power to his advantage, which a lot of people in the Marvel community believe that Tony Stark is going to be one of the key components in stopping Thanos. But the question is how? If he ends up developing some sort of an Infinity Gauntlet, is it ultimately going to kill him as he wields such a power? I do believe that by the end, when having to look at the comic adaptation, we get to see how there were certain versions of Iron Man in the comics where Tony Stark had made a Thor Buster suit with the powers of Odin to deflect Thor's hammer. We see Iron Man do so much in the comics to where he's able to adapt to virtually anybody he comes across. So if not him wielding a gauntlet, the next best thing for Tony to do is to build a suit that's able to basically withstand the powers of not just one Infinity Stone, but 6, all 6 of the Infinity Stones, in fact, because Tony now has experience in what it felt like to battle against Thanos while wielding just about a handful of stones to begin with. So now that he has that knowledge under his disposal, he can use that to his advantage in building some sort of a nanotech-like suit that can combat that even against the powers of the mightiest stones in the universe. Because if you stop and think about the concept and the mind state that Tony is in, at this point, Stark's mission is no longer to be on the defensive side because he failed. The universe has seen death on a scale unknown to many people in the MCU, which include Tony Stark, because Tony had never seen such an event happen right before his very eyes, hence seeing the death of Spider-Man and various other people before him. His friends are dead, and most likely all of these actions are because of his failed attempt in defending not only Earth, but the entirety of the universe itself, which Tony's ultimate mission at this very point in time is to end Thanos, plain and simple. And with such, while on Titan in a different galaxy somewhere out there far beyond Earth, he's going to have to figure out a way how to get home first, which I do believe Ant-Man comes into play by locating and finding Tony as they further discuss the events of what to do, which I do think is going to lead Tony in going into separate pockets of time, different realities and alternative timelines, and him having to gather these stones and making the suit and or Gauntlet. Now again, this all varies as to if you guys believe it'll be suitable for Iron Man to create either A, a gauntlet, or B, a suit. Now let's say, hypothetically speaking, we see Iron Man develop a suit that can go up against Thanos. Then the question lingers, how far can Tony Stark go in that suit before it ultimately succumbs to Thanos' wrath? Because Thanos in the comics, in comparison to the movie, is way inferior by comparison, because in the comics, Thanos is much more powerful than seen on the big screen. So with that being said, we can only imagine that so far, with Thor having the Stormbreaker weapon and Tony Stark assumingly having a Thanos Buster suit, the Avengers should easily be able to overcome Thanos at that given point, right? Wrong. And one of the many reasons for that is because even without the power of the Infinity Stones, Thanos theoretically should be able to overpower every single Avenger there, arguably minus Thor and possibly even Captain Marvel, depending on how they scale them, because in the comics variation, Thor, Hulk, characters of that nature are way more powerful than Captain Marvel. However, in the MCU, Captain Marvel is said to be the strongest Avenger, so she's going to be another key component. But looking at Tony Stark, if he were to build a suit, I can definitely see by the end something happening to Tony Stark without Tony having to have the upper hand completely on Thanos, to where something happens to Tony that directly affects his future in the MCU. Now again, we're not entirely certain if whether or not we're going to see Iron Man, Captain America, characters of that nature in the future of the MCU, that being Avengers 6, Avengers 7, Avengers 8, because if you guys go back to the comics, we've seen various other characters replace Tony Stark and Steve Rogers as Captain America and Iron Man. Females, males, former companions, we've seen alternate versions of these characters, and depending on the direction for the MCU in the future, we're not entirely sure if some of these characters, if not most, are even going to make it around for the upcoming set of Avengers movies, which one of course includes Captain America, which one of course includes Tony Stark. And I do believe that if Tony Stark does end up walking away, it's not going to be without a price. And I do think that by the end of this, if Captain America doesn't end up dying, Tony Stark definitely would. And I understand that without Tony Stark, there is no Avengers. Without Tony Stark, there is no Marvel to an extent. But I do believe that with the way they're setting things up, this could ultimately even set up for the introduction of the Illuminati in the future as well, because we are going to see other characters, the past Avengers that were currently wiped out, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Spider-Man return. And with that, we can ultimately have a different narrative be achieved if Tony Stark were to collect all the Infinity Stones in either A, forging the Gauntlet, or B, forging a suit. Because I do believe that despite what Tony Stark does, it may not fully kill off Thanos, as in the comics before, we've seen Thanos come back. And that really all varies on whether or not they want to follow Thanos' imperative by having Thanos be imprisoned, or in fact if he ends up being killed off by someone of the Avengers in finally getting to meet the actual physical manifestation of death itself in the afterlife. We don't really know. Do I believe that at the end of the day, Tony Stark is going to be the person that's going to kill off Thanos? Probably not, because we still have the Hulk, we still have Thor, even Captain Marvel per se. I don't think that someone like Captain America or Hawkeye or Ant-Man are going to be the one to do the trick, but I do believe that those characters are going to be key components in getting Tony Stark to where he needs to be in order to deliver the final nail in Thanos' coffin. But in the end, I want to know what you guys have to say down in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on Iron Man potentially forging some sort of a suit, or maybe some kind of Infinity Gauntlet of his own, made of vibranium to stop Thanos? What are your overall expectations as to what you expect to see in the Avengers 4 movie? And more importantly, what do you think the overall fate of Iron Man's character is going to be as we carry on in the MCU? Let me know your thoughts down below, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed and cannot wait for the Avengers 4 movie, go ahead and slap a like down below. If you guys are new, hit that subscribe button, guys. Turn on all notifications. Tune back in for more. Iron Man is going to be someone that I really feel as if a lot of people need to pay attention to, because unlike the other characters, there's a very deep story with Tony having to date back all the way to the first Iron Man movie. And I do believe that with Tony having to realize, like, oh crap, everything that he's been working towards up until this point has been a failure, especially with having to prevent such a thing from happening, like Thanos wiping out half of the universe. At this point, it's going to be do or die for Tony's character, and whether or not he actually stays is quite unknown. I really hope that Tony stays, but by the end of this, anything is possible. So let me know your thoughts and theories down below. Thank you all so much for watching, guys. Once again, tune back in for more, and I'll be seeing each and every single one of you guys down in the comment section below. Have a great day, everybody. Peace.